Welcome to everybody who is viewing this meeting of the Licensing Subcommittee of Birmingham City Council. I'm Councillor Philip Davis. I'll be chairing this hearing of Subcommittee A of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee. Before we start, can you all please mute your microphones for the moment in order to improve the sound quality while I talk about the procedure? And could you also turn off your cameras with the exception of committee members? Committee members will have their cameras switched on throughout the hearing. Could everyone attending today's meeting please ensure the mobile phones are on silent and that you're in a obviously suitably quiet room, free from distractions, etc. It's important, obviously, that we ensure that those attending the meeting and making representations are able to hear me and the members of the subcommittee and officers. Any distractions brought to my attention could result in the meeting being suspended temporarily or to another date and time under the regulations for these type of meetings. Formal agenda items. 1, notice of recording webcast. I advise the meeting to note that this is a public meeting. It will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at the meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item. Any declaration will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. 3, apologies and notification of nominee members. Apologies were submitted on behalf of Councillor Beachman, and Councillor Leddy was the nominated substitute member. So can I welcome you to this hearing in respect of 2 review applications submitted in relation to the Royal George, Garrison Lane, Small Heath, Birmingham B9 4PN. Again, I'll just remind you that this is a meeting of the subcommittee, and members are myself, Councillor Philip Davis as chair, Councillor Mike Leddy and Councillor Martin Straker-Wells. Also present in the meeting are the following officers: the licensing officer, Mr. David Kennedy, the committee manager and meeting manager, Katie Townsend, the committee lawyer, Joanne Swampilai. And I'll now come to the parties attending. Firstly, Mr. Swallow, West Midlands Police, are you here today?
Yes, Councillor, present, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Duncan Craig, barrister representing the licensee.
I'm here, Chair, as is the, as I said, the director of the licence holding companies, Mr. McGregor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for that. Withdrawal of representations. Does any person making representations wish to withdraw their representation at this stage of the hearing? I think that's one for you, Mr. Swan.
No, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. So I assume all parties have read and understood the Licensing Committee's procedural rules set out in the notice for today's hearing. Please note that given the nature of today's proceedings, I may at my discretion amend the procedural rules to reflect the fact that the meeting is taking place online, but want to assure all parties that any such amendments will not impact on the parties' right to a fair hearing. We'll be using the chat function in Microsoft Teams to communicate. I think the parties here are familiar with this today, but it's as you know, on the toolbar is a speech bubble, and you'll be able to use this function to type in messages which are monitored and will be notified to me as necessary. But in terms of speaking, it's possible to indicate in the usual way verbally to me that you wish to speak. You can also use the raise a hand function if you wish to do that. We'll all, for recording purposes, we will all confirm, however, that we have access to the chat facility by now typing in our own names. So if you could go to the chat facility and do that, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
That's everyone, Chair.
Okay, except me. I'm having problems getting into it for some reason. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Right, we'll keep the chat column open for the duration of the meeting so that everyone can follow any messages. I don't think anybody's dialed in on audio telephone today, so we're all on Microsoft Teams. And again, with the exception of subcommittee members, please keep your camera off unless you're the person speaking. If there are problems with bandwidth, I may ask everyone to turn the cameras off so the meeting can proceed on the basis of audio. I'm now on to preliminary points, and are there any preliminary points? I have actually had put to me in the context of the fact that we have 2 licenses here, that there is an issue about hearing them separately, hearing the matters separately, or hearing them together. Mr. Guest, do you have any particular? Mr. Craig, do you have any particular view about that?
Well, I'm glad you didn't call me Mr. Duncan, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely sensible that they're both dealt with at the same time. You'll have received my supporting documents this morning, and agreement has been reached with West Midlands Police in relation to both premises, and there's been a bit of give and take in relation to that, which I'll briefly deal with when I make submissions. But that they are to be taken in conjunction with it. They are contained within the same building. I've been down to the premises, and whilst they are separate premises licenses and need to be treated as such, and actually they are different aspects of the same business, which is absolutely sensible. They are separate premises licenses. It would be a bit nuts actually if we didn't deal with them at the same time for the reasons I've outlined. So certainly from the license holder's point of view, that would be a sensible approach, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Swallow, do you have a view on this?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much for that. Yes, my viewpoint is that the matter should be dealt with simultaneously. Yes, I agree, and I'm in full agreement with Mr. Craig that they are 2 separate licenses. They do deal with 2 separate parts of a single business, but for the ease of understanding, it should be dealt with at the same time. Okay.
Thank you very much. The parties have agreed on that, so we'll proceed on that basis and hear them simultaneously. Thank you for that. Procedurally, as you know, firstly, the licensing officer, Mr. David Kennedy, will present the report. Then I will ask the applicant, West Midlands Police, to make their presentation within a time envelope of about 20 minutes. And then the licence holder representative, Mr. Craig, will be invited to make submissions in the same time scale. And again, can all parties speak as slowly and clearly as they possibly can to assist officers take notes for the meeting today, and obviously the live streaming process as well. Okay, so please note that members of the subcommittee will be able to ask questions at any stage, but we'll try only to do so at the conclusion of each presentation. Cross-examination by the applicant and those making representations is not normally permitted unless the members consider it appropriate. Again, if there's any confusion or difficulty in getting my attention, please use the chat facility and this will be notified to me. If at any point you can't hear or having problems with your internet connection, this will probably become apparent, but if it doesn't, please use the chat facility if you can. Or otherwise alert the meeting manager to the problem. Could I point out that occasionally it may be necessary for the subcommittee to take legal advice. At my discretion, I may ask all parties to wait in the meeting while members of the relevant officers withdraw to take legal advice using a separate meeting within Microsoft Teams. We'll then return to this meeting and continue. And if there are any problems with the live stream being broadcast on the City Council website, I'll ask you all to mute your microphones and cameras and to stop speaking until the live stream is restored. If at any time the meeting goes into private session, the meeting manager will pause the live stream. Once the private part of the meeting is over, I'll ask the meeting manager to confirm that the live stream is resumed before we continue. And at the conclusion of the hearing, I'll invite all parties to make a brief closing submission. No decision will be taken until all the evidence has been heard. And at the decision-making stage, the members and the relevant officers will withdraw from the meeting in order to determine the decision. They'll go into a separate Microsoft Teams meeting. And if we need to clarify any points, you'll be telephoned by the meeting manager. The members will then make their decision. Notification of the determination of the application will be sent out to all parties within 5 working days. Okay, so on to the main order of business then. So can I now ask the Licensing Officer, Mr. David Kennedy, to present the report, please? Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, can you confirm that you can hear me? Is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. West Midlands Police applied on the 9th of June 2021 under Section 51 of the Licensing Act 2003 for review of the 2 premises licences granted to Briskland Limited for the Royal George, Garrison Lane, Small Heath, Birmingham B9 4pm. The purpose of the reports before the subcommittee today are to consider the review applications and to determine them. The content or grounds of the review applications are the same and are published at Appendix 1 of each report. A copy of each premises licence is attached at Appendix 2 of the published reports, and site location plans are at Appendix 3 of each report. West Midlands Police have submitted supporting documents in the form of a witness statement from Mark Swallow. This morning, the licence holder's legal representative submitted 2 sets of proposed conditions, one for each licence, which they have advised were agreed with West Midlands Police on Friday. When carrying out its licensing functions, a licensing authority must have regard to Birmingham City Council's statement of licensing policy and the guidance issued by the Secretary of State under Section 182 of the Act. The authority is required to take such steps as it considers appropriate to promote the 4 licensing objectives. The options available to the committee today are to modify the conditions of the licences, exclude a licence activity from the scope of the licences, remove the designated premises supervisor, suspend the licences for a period not exceeding 3 months, revoke the licences, or take no action. Where the authority takes a step to modify conditions or exclude a licensable activity, it may provide that modification or exclusion is to have effect for only such period not exceeding 3 months as it may specify. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. We're now on to the applicant's presentation. So, Mr. Swallow, West Midlands Police, would you like to address us?
Thank you, Chair. This matter relates to the Royal George Public House and Hotel, which is situated at the junction of Garrison Lane and Tilton Road in the Small Heath area of Birmingham. The premises, as we've discussed, has 2 licences. One is for a hotel, a 24-hour licence for guests to consume alcohol, and from 10 to midnight for persons passing, and licence 1277 for the public house from 10 till midnight for the public to consume alcohol. Licences also allow for dancing, music, late night refreshment, indoor sporting events and films. The premises cater for hotel guests and local trade normally. However, due to its location near to the St Andrews Football Stadium, on match days the demographic is to cater for football supporters supporting Birmingham City. Each designated football match is subject to the West Midlands Police operation to ensure public safety and prevent disorder from taking place. Part of this operations involves dedicated officers from the football unit attending local public houses, including the Royal George, to achieve the goals of the operation. The grounds of this review come from repeated failures of the premises and management throughout the COVID pandemic. This has been through the premises not following the regulations, which is a criminal offence, but also breaching the extensive guidance designed to help keep premises operate in a COVID secure manner. This has happened to a level that is placing an increased risk of infection to the staff, customers, officers that attend, and also the wider community. West Midlands police staff have visited the Royal George on 4 occasions. On 3 of these occasions, the premises were found to be in breach of the coronavirus regulations. That suggests that the premises routinely breach the regulations. As a national response to a global pandemic, it's imperative that the regulations are followed to save lives and prevent suffering. The premises has shown a cavalier disregard for the well-being of the public, putting profit above that. On the 27th of the 7th, 2020, I visited the premises in the afternoon as a result of an incident on the 22nd of the 7th, 2020, where social distancing had not been followed and persons in the rear yard of the premises had been letting off flares. That was witnessed by the football spotters who had reported the matter to ourselves at the licensing department. During the visit, I adopted the West Midlands Police 4E approach. This was to engage with the premises. In that case, it was Anton McGroty, the son of Leo, who's present today, who is also a director of Briskland, to explain to him the legislation and how it had been breached, and then to encourage him to follow the guidance issued by the government. As that was the first occasion that the premises had been spoken to in relation to a COVID breach, I did not proceed to the 4th E, which is enforcement. An entry was made on West Midlands Police recording system for licensed premises to record the incident and the action taken. Mr. McGroty accepted the advice. On the 1st of the 5th, 2021, officers from the West Midlands Police Football Unit visited the premises as Birmingham City were playing Cardiff City. In the rear yard of the premises was a group of between 20 and 30 males. Those people were all stood up and were drinking. PC MAP made contact with the designated premises supervisor, Leo McGroty, by telephone. Mr. McGroty was dismissive of the concerns of the officer and refused to make any intervention in the situation. That was disappointing, as the officer was witnessing a poorly operated premises which was not compliant with the COVID guidance and regulations. This was a clear breach of the crime and disorder and public safety licensing objectives. The matter was referred to ourselves on the licensing team to follow up. On Thursday, the 20th of May 2021, IMPC Ben Reader visited the premises in relation to that incident. The premises was very quiet. It was a weekday afternoon. There was a sole female member of staff working behind the bar. There were 4 males in one room and 2 in the other, the back room. In the front room of the premises, an elderly customer was standing at the bar, drinking a pint of beer, reading his newspaper. He'd been clearly allowed to do this prior to our arrival. When we were there, he was directed to sit down by the member of staff, but didn't seem to understand why he was being asked to do this, and it appeared that that was done for the benefit of ourselves. A customer in the rear room was seen to approach the bar with a pint glass in his hand and also not wearing a mask. That should not have been permitted, as customers sat indoors should only have been served by a table service only. The manner in which the premises was operating, whilst it had so few customers inside, was obviously of significant concern. It seemed to be operating without measures in place, and if they couldn't comply with COVID safe measures with a small number of people inside, the question would be asked as to how it would operate when it was busy. I again spoke to Anton McGroty on the telephone in relation to the incident. He stated that he was aware of the incident in the rear yard and made light of it, stating it was only 20 men, some of whom were standing. I told him he would be issued with a fixed penalty notice to the value of £1,000 for the issues on that day, and that consideration would be given to review of the premises licence. I'd adopted again the 4E approach. However, as the first 3 E's had not worked previously, that's why I resorted to the 4th E of enforcement. Since that time, I've been approached by the premises licence holder, who has shown his willingness to work with the police to try and sort these issues out. A period of negotiation has taken place whereby we've come up with a joint set of conditions, both for the hotel licence and for the licence for the public house. It is my belief that these conditions will hopefully stop these issues from reoccurring. Mr. McGroty realises the seriousness of the situation and he wishes to make amends for that. He is prepared to make changes to his operating procedures in order to do that, and it's my belief that he will be true to his word, and I would recommend the institution of the conditions as agreed. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swallow. Members' questions. Councillor Leddy?
I've got no questions, Chair.
Councillor Straker-Wells?
No questions, Chair.
Okay, none from me. So thank you very much for that, Mr. Swallow.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so now we move on to presenting the licensee. So, Mr. Craig, would you like to make your presentation?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I can keep it brief, and if you've got any questions, that's fine. I do feel compelled to say that, I mean, if this had been a contested hearing, there would have been some disputes about interpretations, but I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the fact that two parties have moved closer together as the hearing has advanced towards us. I've engaged with helpful discussions with West Midlands Police. There's been some give and take on both sides. For example, I think it's questionable whether the hotel licence should have been reviewed because there was just simply no evidence of any licensable activities taking place in association with that. So there has been some give and take on both sides, and I think that's always helpful and demonstrative of a licence holder or a director of a licence holding company who does take his responsibility seriously. Because I feel further compelled to say this is a man who's been in the trade for 35 years in this city. He's had these premises for 14 years, which I don't think anyone is going to dispute are in a challenging area, both in Small Heath and being next to Birmingham City Football Club. You can see from both these premises licenses, neither of them have been reviewed before, and that speaks to his capabilities and his diligence in terms of running his operation. Leo and his son Anton as well. They're very much it's very much a family business. I've been down to the premises and certainly impressed with the way they run things. There have been issues that have been raised by West Midlands Police during coronavirus. That's where we find ourselves here today. And as a consequence of that, you have these conditions which are agreed with West Midlands Police. And I would just simply invite you to follow the agreed path between the parties, which is to add these conditions onto each of the premises licenses. They are different from each other because it reflects the different nature of the businesses. It also reflects the fact that one's a hotel, the other's a pub stroke, it's a pub. So and they've got different hours as well. So the conditions reflect that and reflect the fact that you shouldn't have uniform conditions. Conditions should be tailored to the type of premises, and so for that reason, I think this is another good example of a license holder and the police working together, finding some common ground, and getting to an agreed position, which hopefully makes your job a little bit easier. And so therefore, yes, I simply invite you to follow the path that is agreed between the parties. I don't know if I can assist you any further.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I'll just see if members have any questions then. Councillor Straker-Wells?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Craig. And yes, it's always encouraging when both parties are able to reach an accommodation, and the conditions would appear to, if you like, give a signal that the future will be around public duty of care for the public and resolution of problems. I mean, the only question in my mind, having heard what you had to say, was that if you had legislation before on COVID, which was not really taken seriously, are you confident that the agreed conditions of the West Midlands Police will be given a lot more regard than previous?
Well, as I've said to you before, that there is a difference of interpretation of some of the matters. I don't want to dwell on that, but all I would say is this is a licence holder who's held this licence through a company for 14 years. There've been no issues, and let's not forget it's next to Birmingham City Football Club. I know from my first meeting with Mr. McGrorty and his son how seriously they take their responsibilities, in particular in relation to match days. As you can imagine, any pub that's next to the St Andrews has the potential to attract issues that are capable of undermining the licensing objectives, especially crime and disorder, or prevention of crime and disorder, and public nuisance in particular. This pub, to all intents and purposes, has not been on West Midlands Police or any other responsibilities radar in those circumstances. So you have evidence there in respect of the Licensing Act and the promotion of the licensing objectives of somebody who addresses that in a purposeful and responsible manner. And so, in answer to your question, from my point of view, I have no doubt that these conditions will be purposefully and responsibly promoted by Mr. McGrorty and his son.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Leddy?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Craig, the DPS made light of the comments when a police constable and licensing officer visited the premises on I think it's the 20th of May. And I'm wondering whether I have confidence that the current DPS is someone who is going to adhere not just to the conditions that you've put before us as an option that you've agreed with West Midlands Police, but all the other conditions around the licence. Can someone comment on that?
Sorry, Councillor Leddy, I'm just slightly confused. When Mr. McGrorty, who sits with me now, the DPS, that was on the 5th, when he's alleged to have been dismissive on the phone. That was the 1st of May. That's when it says in. I just want to be clear. That's what the incident you're talking to.
On Thursday, the 20th, Mark Swallow and PC Ben Reader visited, and that on the telephone. Hold on. I've lost my place now. Just give me a minute. I will find it.
Sorry, Councillor, I called you Chair then. Sorry, apologies, Councillor Davis. You said that Mr. McGrorty was dismissive. That actually relates to the visit on the 1st of May.
Yes.
Right. Well, Mr. McGrorty does not accept that he was dismissive of the concerns of the officer. This was not an officer from the licensing. It wasn't Mr. Swallow or Constable Reader. And he does not accept he was dismissive on the phone. But we're not here to challenge that. I can't challenge that.
Okay.
He doesn't accept that he was dismissive on the phone.
All right. Okay. Now, the other concern I have is that for the hotel license, which is 1277.
No.
Oh, is that sorry, the public house premises
It's
1277.
1277. That's a license of some antiquity, and obviously numbers tend to run sequentially. So that is older than the hotel license.
Yeah. Okay. On condition 18, I just have a concern because I've stayed in a premises where, well, not in this country, it was abroad, where bottles and glasses were disposed of after midnight. And I'm just wondering whether that 1 o'clock in the morning disposal of glasses and bottles is movable.
All I will say to that, I got specific instructions on that, and agreement with West Midlands Police who visited the premises. There are no residential properties anywhere near that pub. None.
Yeah, there are guests stopping in the hotel.
There are guests stopping in the hotel. It's soundproofed, apparently, according to my client. If you want to ask my client about that operationally, Mr. McGrorty.
Yeah. Well, the hotel was.
Let me turn the camera around if I may, Chair.
Okay.
Councillor Leddy, sorry, used to call you chairs. Apologies. Hang on.
Yeah, the hotel is an extension to the building itself, so it's only about 12 years old, and it was all of it soundproof for those reasons to avoid noise and that sort of thing. So we've never had any complaints on the noise issues within the hotel.
Okay, so it's soundproofed and air conditioned.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you for that. No questions from me. Members have dealt with those. So is that your submission, Mr. Craig?
Tis, Chair. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Well, we now move then to closing submissions and back to Mr. Swallow, West Midlands Police.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, there was concerns raised regarding the conduct of this public house and hotel. It was in relation to the breaches of the coronavirus regulations. At the outset of this, my belief was licence revocation. How could I have confidence in the company, the persons running the company, to run this premises and promote the licensing objectives? I've been impressed during the time between then and now at their willingness to change. As you've heard from Mr. Craig, there is 2 licenses from the premises. One is a hotel licence, one is the public house licence. There's been a willingness to change the hotel licence to be up to modern standards in relation not only to issues around football, but also in relation to CSE, which is more of a problem with hotels these days than ever has been. And they've been prepared to listen and bring their practices up to date with the current threats. I believe that the company and the people behind the company have made significant moves forward in running their premises in a way that promotes the licensing objectives, and I believe their willingness to observe conditions will be something that they actually do, and they realise the seriousness of this now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Swallow. I think the public might not know what CSE is. What's CSE? I
apologise for that. That is child sexual exploitation and criminal exploitation of children.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Okay, so final word to you, Mr. Craig.
Yeah, just to be clear on that CSE point, a couple of things on that actually. First of all, no suggestion in any way whatsoever these premises are or have been at any point associated with anything in relation to that. But also, I have to say, in my discussions with Leo in particular, that was one condition that he had absolutely no issue with whatsoever and fully understood the reasons for it. And I think that again speaks to his responsible attitude. He understands the issues around that and the risks around that, and we all, any reasonable, decent person would take any reasonable steps to help with that blight on our society. So I just want to make that point, given we are in a public hearing, and just to endorse what West Midlands Police have said, and reiterate, this has been a good example of both parties working together. The licence holder, and look, as often is the case, licences get granted, time moves on, conditions move on. It's a useful exercise for the responsible authorities to perhaps tighten conditions up, but I'll do that now around match days. And so, yes, I would just invite you to follow the agreed path, as I've said, and add these conditions as agreed to the premises licence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Craig, and thank you, Mr. Swallow, for all the helpful information. Okay, so now I'll ask all parties to leave the MS Teams meeting, and the members, the committee lawyer and the committee manager will go into private session while the subcommittee makes its decision, and will be notified of the decision of the subcommittee within 5 working days. Thank you very much for your participation in the hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.